Hello and welcome to another very special FYC conversation about HBO's special episodes of Euphoria. I'm Stacey Wilson Hunt, and I'm so honored to be joined today by creator, writer, director, and executive producer Sam Levinson, and actor Hunter Schafer, who also co-wrote and is a producer on this episode. Welcome to both of you. How are you today?
Pretty
Very
good,
well.
thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Hunter, how did it feel to hear those new credits added to your title?
I'm loving it. It feels really nice. Definitely, yeah, feels suitable for the artistic side of me.
Well, and based on what I saw in the episode, it seems very fitting that you did seem to fully encompass this story, which was really so beautifully well done. Before we talk about the episode, you're welcome. Because this is an audience of actors, I would love for you to tell the story of how you got cast in this show, because I know it wasn't a traditional casting experience, and you're definitely not a traditional actor. So tell us how you were discovered and ultimately placed in this amazing series.
Yeah. Well, I remember casting calls going out. And I was living in New York at the time, modeling, and like seeing them all over Instagram and whatnot, and like I saw it, but I was not thinking about acting at the time at all. And then my model agency said that they had reached out and asked me to come in and audition, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll give it a shot, and then I, I got some of the sides, went in, and then got asked to come back. And it kind of like kept going. I think I went in like 5 times in New York, and got more of the scripts during that timeline too. And started like, I was like, oh wait, this is pretty cool actually. And then, yeah, I was brought out to LA for final audition, which is where I first met Sam, and did it in front of a room full of HBO execs, and I was so terrified because I genuinely had no idea what I was doing, just kind of winging it, and it pulled through and ended up, changing my life, and I'm very, very thankful for it. So.
And Sam, what were your first impressions the first time you saw Hunter perform?
Well, Hunter immediately had this kind of magnetic, raw, sort of untapped energy, and there is something about specific actors when the chemistry or alchemy when you of camera and what they look like on camera and how they just radiate. And I think what I thought was so important for the character of Jules was that she had a radiance and a warmth, that she was the light of this show in many ways, and also had kind of a very concrete sense of self, because I think a lot of the other characters are searching for who they are,
right,
and Hunter just had that in just millions and millions of layers of all of those things, and I remember after that audition at HBO, which I can't even imagine how terrifying and weird it was, because it was in a theater with 30 HBO execs who were kind of all sitting in the back. It's kind of cool that they do it, but it felt very much like, old Hollywood, studio system kind of thing of, well, we need to see them live,
It was terrifying.
But yeah. And I think it was about a day or two later, like Hunter and I just sat down at a diner. I kind of, I reached out and said, can we just sit down and like talk about this character and everything? And we ended up just staying there for like 5 hours, just kicking around ideas and things, and conversations about like art and life and ourselves in a way that I couldn't wait to collaborate with her, because she has such a just an unbelievable sensitivity and artistry to her that I'm so grateful for, and the show is better for me.
It's hard to imagine the show without you now. So I'm glad that all worked out. So when crafting this special episode, which is obviously so personal and so intensely emotional, and for those who may not have seen it, it features your character Jules in a very intense therapy session with Lauren Weedman, who is so wonderful in this part, by the way. I'm such a huge fan of hers.
Awesome.
She's incredible.
Yeah, she's really, and it's nice to see her doing she's a comedy person, but it's really nice to see her doing this too. She's really wonderful. Mm-hmm. When the two of you sat down to craft the arc of this conversation, what was the structure of that process? Sam, did you sort of, block out what you thought might be the case, and then Hunter, you've kind of filled it in, or did it kind of start with you, Hunter, with the themes that you wanted to explore, and then you created the structure after, Sam?
It's funny to hear, but only because I'm so not an organized writer in any way. Like I don't like that process seems completely anathema to me. Just either one of them. I think what happened is HBO had kind of allowed us to do these COVID episodes, small contained episodes. And so it meant that I had to write under very specific kind of conditions, 5 to 7 day shoots, and without really any location moves, or one location. And so I like this idea of doing this kind of 2-part diptych of sorts of Rue and Jules. And at the same time, there was around that time, there was on Twitter, there was a debate that erupted randomly one day about, is Jules a villain? Is her character a villain? And really? I found it so utterly disturbing and appalling that we had created a show that anybody in the universe could look at could look at the character of Jules and not understand the weight and burden that was on her shoulders, from Rue's sobriety to all the bullshit, with Nate and everything. Right. And I just thought, fuck these people. I'm going to force them to watch an entire episode from her perspective. And I'd like to go back through season 1 and see and look at the entire thing from her perspective. So I called up Hunter, and Hunter and I have been, we've been collaborating on a script, a movie that we've been working on for a little bit. So we always kind of have this ongoing, kind of creative discussion and everything. I called her up. I was like, did you see this shit? Like, we went back and forth. We were talking about it. And then I kind of had this sort of the general idea of what I want to do. And we just started talking. And then suddenly it was about 6 hours later, she said, well, I wrote this poem when I was like 16 or something, and about the ocean, and about how she wants to be as strong as the ocean and as feminine as the ocean. And it just completely took my breath away. I mean, even thinking about it, I get really emotional because it's such a beautiful, unbelievable idea. And I was like, fuck, you want to just write this shit together? And she's like, yeah, I'm down. And then so we just sat on the phone and we wrote the thing together in like 4 or 5 days or something.
Yeah.
Wow. And Hunter, when that Twitter conversation, which again, we can't give too much value to those kind of things, but how did that make we all had to let's take a step back. This will be gone in 2 days. But how did you feel how did it feel to have people say that about the work that you had done, when clearly that is so off the mark for what this story is, and certainly the function of your character? I mean, that's so ridiculous to even hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it was slightly unnerving. I mean, but I'd also known that a portion of the audience had felt this way about Jules, just based off of reactions I'd seen, and it, for some wild reason, flared up not too far apart from when we started having this conversation about the episode. But I really care about Jules. Like, I love Jules, and I understand why she does everything that she does, and do not feel like she is a villain for taking any of the paths that she took in season 1. But I also understand like how they can come to a conclusion like that, I guess, particularly when Rue is narrating a lot of season 1, and and it is through her eyes, and yeah, I mean, it did, I think it has been prompting like a feeling of wanting to defend her. Like, I've typed out a few too many Twitter drafts of just like, fuck all of you. She's doing, she's going through this and this and this, and y'all need to understand that, whatever. But I think this episode was a much more beautiful and elegant way to, kind of set things straight.
And I'm glad you chose this method as the response.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but further to that point, I think that's kind of look, at the same time, I'm happy for all of the discussion around the show and whatever it may be, even if I totally vehemently disagree with it, because in a weird way, that tension between, I think, us as artists, out of that, we kind of forge new ideas. And so and I think what this show has always been about is challenging people's preconceptions and prejudices about other people, and continuously flipping it on their head and revealing new layers and new sides to things. So even just in how the audience, or how, I think a lot of mainstream press responded to the show when it first came out, they were like horrified. It was always like, oh, this is a grim thing, and this is all that. And I just kept, I was so excited because I couldn't wait for them to get to the end, because it's not that. It's about human interaction and human behavior, and it's really beautiful, and it's about empathy. And so I think flipping those things is something that really interests me as a writer.
Well, I also think too, it's refreshing for a character like Jules to not have to be a savior for everyone around her, because a lot of trans characters tend to be these healers, and that's not fair. She should be allowed to have all this like gamut of experiences and not always have to be the sage, wise, spiritual presence in every room that she's in. So I actually sort of appreciate that backlash, because it means that people are really thinking about the story. So I guess that's the silver lining.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yes. So there's so much in this conversation that she's having with her therapist, and I wish we could dissect every nuance of every topic. But I have chosen a few topics that I'd love to break out and just have you talk about them and why you included them. So the first one that really impacted me was her talking about self-criticism. And she says, "I'd be lost without it." And Sam, I have a feeling this resonates with you, and as any artist. But I do want to ask both of you, how much does that sentiment mean to you, and why was that an important theme to explore in the conversation? Because I think we all identify with that, but I have a feeling the two of you are very closely aligned with that feeling.
Yeah. You want to take that one first, Hunter?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that topic sort of falls into the idea that, like, while Jules is like knows who she is and has a very like profound sense of self at such a young age, the episode also kind of takes that and turns it on its head, in that like her journey with that is not over, and realistic to 17-year-old trans girl to like have a definite sense of self that is like linear and stops right there. And so I think like part of what we wanted to portray was like the spiral of like her sense of self just kind of continuing, and being constantly fluid and constantly in motion, and how confusing that can be, and part of like that process, I think, of like figuring out who you are is like a dialogue of self-criticism in your head, and figuring out what you like and what you don't like, and yeah, I think like that's what it ties into. And yeah, like
well, there's also, I think, the theme of it's a comfort, that there's sort of that comfort
Yeah.
in constantly never being satisfied with yourself. And Sam, how do you relate to that in terms of just being an artist, but you've been so open about your struggles? Is there a comfort in that daily struggle of never thinking that you're doing everything you should be?
Yeah, but look, I think it extends to everything. I mean, in the sense that I think the way that I think that constant self-criticism is sometimes beneficial in terms of who you are and how you feel about yourself, and are my actions reflecting that? Do I feel like I embody who I am inside? And I think that's what Jules is grappling with, is as her emotional evolution kind of continues through, and I sparked very much by um, her love for Rue, and how that opens her eyes to this a kind of a wider sense of uh, of uh, of I think femininity in many ways, and what it means, and can she be strong, and can she be it's that. So I think that there's an aspect to it that's healthy, and that interrogation is healthy, and then there's an aspect of it, I think, for anyone, where it can border on crippling, and it can box you in, and make you feel as if as if you're stuck or in a cycle. I mean, that's the spiral, So,
Right.
So I don't know. And look, I think there's a beautiful aspect to it, but I think what the therapist says is right. It's like, are you sure it's necessary? I'd be lost without it, or free. And I think that's kind of that's one of the great mysteries of life.
I love that. And you mentioned the word femininity, which segues to one of my other favorite parts, where she talks about conquering femininity. And in reality, femininity has conquered her. And I'd love for you to tell us what that means to you, Hunter.
Yeah, I think it's something that feels relatively personal to me, as well, as far as like my journey with like gender and my understanding of myself, and like within the framework of the world, and like what the world has given me to work with, versus what actually like feels right in my heart, which I think is really applicable to Jules, and something that I wanted to explore with her. In that like in season 1, we see her kind of trying to affirm herself in these ways that are like ending up hurting her, and once that really turns on, it's like kind of implodes and fucks her over. I think she's kind of forced to confront like the brokenness of the femininity that she's taken on, or like what that she created for herself, and so like with this, I think it's I think she's just grappling with like where does she fit within womanhood, or within femininity, and like if it's hurting her, like why is she even participating in it?
Right. Well, then we see her question whether or not to continue with her hormones. And it seems like
Right.
in that moment, she's wondering, is there a sense of me being able to pull back a little bit and and just sort of try to mitigate the process a little bit, and which obviously I would assume is probably not very tenable, considering what she's already traveled down that road. I mean, I imagine that's a very hard time she's in. Yeah.
Right. But I think even the hormones feel less like a part of the femininity spiral, as much as it is like, I think she's considering the idea of being more open to like working with what like what happens to her, like what's you know, like given to her, like, because she mentions wanting to go off her blocker specifically,
Right.
and I mean, I think there's like I think she sees like potential in being able to find her own form of beauty and femininity and understanding of self through without blocking anything, which, you know, is
Right.
complicated and maybe like
Right.
wouldn't work. You know, dysphoria is also a thing that it's really complicated, but
Of course. Right.
but I think she's just like weighing her options and sort of like trying to like figure it out, right?
But what's also, I think, really beautiful about this show, and something that I really, I think part of why I feel such a kindred spirit in Hunters is because I think we look at these ideas from a philosophical and creative standpoint, and I understand the necessity for people to also view it through a political lens, but it's not what I think guides the exploration of self within me. And what I love about it is the freedom to discover these characters through our own specificity in the hopes of creating something that feels universal and free from the idea of trying to encapsulate them within kind of political narratives. And I understand the necessity of, you know, of critique and all of that, and I love it because it's everyone has a different role to play. But I think that there's something that's exciting about dealing with these issues philosophically, creatively, and also in abstractions. I think one of the things about Hunter that is so fucking unique is that she is a visual artist. And what I love about collaborating with her as a writer and as a producer is we can be talking about something that's dialogue based, and she goes, hold on, I have to draw this. And she'll draw this kind of wild, extraordinary thing. I'm always trying to like steal them from her because I want them on my wall. But what's fascinating is I think sometimes when you're dealing with things like gender and identity, it's so complicated that and so hard to describe at times that the only thing that feels like it truly captures it is the abstract, is the poetry, is this and it is metaphor. And I think that imprint is all throughout this episode, where it tonally takes on a very different style. And I think that's just the nature of how Hunter approaches things as a visual artist, and our collaboration together is it takes on this kind of poetic and unusual, abstract, slightly surrealist tone, and I'm extremely proud of it. So I don't know. I think I only say that because it's funny because I love reading critiques of the show and stuff, and I always find myself on the other end of certain sort of political, sort of spats, whether it's the right or the left, interestingly enough, and I'm always kind of fascinated by it. And I think as soon as we start trying to look at character and look at human being and look at emotion through a political lens first, that's when we should stop making this show, because it's not about human beings. It's about and it's not about emotion. And I think that's what needs to come first, and then the discussion can follow.
Right. And when we start crafting narratives based on how they're going to be funneled later on, that doesn't really serve anyone. And one of the final things I wanted to talk about was that she is angry that Rue's sobriety depends on how available she is to her. And that really, I started to think about, and I haven't struggled with this myself, and obviously Sam can weigh in his experience, but the pressure on those around the sober person to constantly be propping them up and am I giving you everything you need? and what is the impact on those people. And I like the fact that she was able to articulate that she's angry that she's been put in that situation. So tell me a little bit about each of you exploring that. And Sam, what did you sort of teach Hunter about that feeling? And then what did she teach you about that relationship?
Well, I think, look, here's the interesting thing. When we did season 1 together, it was fascinating because Hunter, hadn't acted before, but she had this kind of raw energy and magnetism and stuff. And what was so beautiful about, I think, this experience and the idea of coming back to this show is her mastery of and her real command of the instrument of acting and her own emotion and stuff. And so what was interesting about it is like, look, I think these are all discussions that we had, but one of the things that I was afraid of when in pre-production, because Hunter was there every day, shot listing with us, talking about lighting, everything. And it was such an extraordinary experience. I kept going, shit, she's got like 30 pages of dialogue to memorize. Like, what,
Right.
like, how's she going to do that? Is it going to be all right? And she just showed up, and there was this just openness and an emotional kind of availability that was just stunning. I mean, every single person on the crew was, and it was I do a lot of takes. It was like 16, 20 takes, one after another, where
Wow.
she would just had complete and just crying, moving through it, pulling herself together. It was a really kind of extraordinary thing to watch, just from an outside perspective of just the growth of an artist and whatever that emotional connection is that she found in that way, and just her courage to just dive into it.
That's great.
And so I know that might not have been the question, but that's just what came to mind. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
This is a time for you to shine in whatever form that takes. But
it's a SAG panel. We should be talking about it. It's true though. It was extraordinary to watch, and like it's part of why it's why I love this show is to watch the kind of creative life of an actor just explode open on camera in a way that is so just exhilarating to watch. And it's just, look, I really feel it, like watching this episode and working with Hunter on it, and our collaboration, just, it makes me so proud to be a part of this show and to have a show that can just say, fuck it. I don't care what people like about the first season, what they want the second season. We can do this. And if we can do this, then that's the only reason I'm interested in working in television, is the ability to do things like this.
Agreed. And Hunter, as a closing thought, how has this experience changed you, and has it given you confidence to want to pursue directing and writing and broadening the scope of what your artistic abilities are?
Yeah. Those were things that I was already thinking about beforehand, just because like my entire life, like the more hands-on, physical, creative side of things has always felt more natural to me, and acting has certainly taken some getting used to, because I did not see myself as a performer before this experience. But I think like what happened between season 1 and these that I didn't realize had happened was that I had formed a relationship with acting that was kind of dependent, in that I didn't realize how much I needed it, and I had like this year, like Jules says, like this year I've had a bit of a rough year, and when I got I was just like counting down the days till we started shooting, and like I didn't realize that I like needed acting the way the catharsis like of doing this episode told me that I did need it, and while I'm still like not totally sure like acting is what I want to do the rest of my life, or you know, and I didn't even know I wanted to be an actor before this. Like I do recognize that a relationship has been formed largely through Sam, who has literally taught me how to act from day one. Like and it's stretched out to just kind of life-changing in life-changing ways, and that it has completely changed my relationship to emotion and art, like in general, and the way he like looks at those things and moves through emotion is incredible. And yeah, it's just yeah. But then like doing the behind the scenes stuff too, I'm like, oh, like that was, oh, production was so much fun. Like we just were like throwing around ideas all day and drawing stuff and like coming up with like the scene orders and shot. Like it was a dream. It was so much fun. I definitely could see myself doing that for like the rest of my life. I miss it so much. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you were able to enjoy the gift of that during such a tough time and escape into the art. And hopefully that'll be a bridge to a little bit simpler times next year, hopefully for everybody.
Yeah.
When she can actually resume some normalcy. But yes, art has been a great respite for people this year. And I'm happy for both of you that you were able to come together during such a hard time and create this beautiful content. So congratulations.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I pray to the ocean, but I also pray to the creative gods, you know, because it's the only thing that's ever saved me my entire life, you know. And I think that's the interesting kind of aspect to it, is it's, you know, just being able to imagine and dream and think about things and work with, you know, such talented artists like Hunter is what I don't know. It's just it's what life's about, at least for me, and it's what makes it worth living. You know, but it's true though. It's true, and I know you feel the same way. You know what I mean? It's a savior. It's I don't know. It's all we have. It's all, you know.
That's for sure.
Well,
and how wonderful you were both blessed with. No, it's good. And we're here to celebrate gifts, and each of you has been blessed with a lot of gifts and talents. So it's a wonderful thing to celebrate. And hopefully SAG members will have enjoyed the episodes, and Twitter will have some interesting reactions too. We'll look forward to those.
As always. Thank you so much for doing this with us. We really appreciate it.
Of course. And congratulations to both of you. And I can't wait to see how the world receives this latest installment of such an important show. It's hard to even describe it at this point. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.